Hi everyone, my name is Oliver Segovia and welcome to the e-commerce panel. So what we're going to be doing here is basically talk about how this space is developing in the region. It's obviously a very exciting space for us all. I think the official figures are like $500 billion of e-commerce spending going into Asia, and from a venture capital standpoint, it's also one of the hottest spaces for investment. So what we're going to do is we'll just ask everyone to, in the panel, tell us who you are, what you do. If you want to throw in your favorite Game of Thrones character, go ahead. We'll start with Magnus on this end.
It's Magnus here. I am the managing director of Silora. Silora, we're a fashion e-retailer across Southeast Asia. So we operate in most of the Southeast Asian countries, plus Australia and New Zealand. I'm based out of Singapore, but spend a lot of time in all of our countries. We sell our own products on top of selling all the big brands out there. That's my background is from Norway. Before coming to Silora, I used to work for McKinsey. Worked with a few startups before that as well. Very excited to be here. Thanks a lot for the invitation. It's so cool to see all of the entrepreneurs here at Startup Asia.
Hey, nice to meet you. My name is Joe. I'm from Q10, Singapore. So Q10 is basically operating in Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia, Japan, and China. But my focus is primarily for the Southeast Asia. So if you need something like $15, $20 clothes, and then the iPhone case and iPhone cables, and sometimes like the home electronics, just check out our website.
Hi, Hi, I'm Kelvin from the Alibaba group. I'm representing Taobao today. Basically, I think most of the people here who are in e-commerce will probably know what Taobao is about. We're basically an e-commerce marketplace, a C2C marketplace. We sell just about everything under the sun. So basically, I'm based out of Singapore, and the Singapore office basically looks after the Southeast Asia region. Yep, thanks.
Hi, my name is Saemin. I come from Rakuten. Specifically, I handle Rakuten Ventures. I've run it for the past year. We recently executed the Viber deal, and we've been around for about a year and a half doing investments in and around technology. Before this, I was in Google and doing stuff related to business development and sales. Nice to be here.
Cool. As for me, my day job is an e-commerce company in the Philippines called Ava.ph, and at night I run a very small family office with investments and ventures in real estate, hospitality, and outsourcing. So let's get the ball rolling, and I guess the first question, which is probably on a lot of everyone's minds, is e-commerce is such an infrastructure and architecture dependent business, right? Like the local ecosystem has to get a number of things right before e-commerce can take off, from payments to last mile delivery to sustainable customer acquisition. So I guess we'll start with Magnus. From Zalora's point of view, what do you feel are those infrastructure ingredients that have progressed the past few years? What has improved, and what do you think is still lacking across the region?
I think that's a great question. I think there are still lots of challenges out there, but there's tons of improvement, right? Just look at the bandwidth available, the internet penetration growth in a lot of our countries. It's really moving really fast. I think the one thing that has really mattered the most for us is the ability to find good ways of delivering the products to our customers in a fast way, right? So one of the big issues in a lot of our countries, I can take Indonesia as an example, for example, is that people are used to being able to touch and feel the product when they buy it, and they don't have trust in online players, or at least they didn't used to. They're starting to gain it now. Before, you would need to take the payment through bank transfer or through a credit card, so they had to pay up front, give away the money, and then wait for the package. One of the things that logistics providers, partly through working with us and other e-commerce players, have successfully done in a lot of the countries we're working in is developing a system where you have cash on delivery. For example, in Indonesia, as I mentioned an example earlier, we cover now around 80% of the population through cash on delivery. Meaning that you can order the package and you just write in your address, and you wait for it, and then 3 to 4 days later you get it at your door, and you haven't paid anything, but you just pay there, get it, and deliver it back. This is capability that in most of the Southeast Asian countries didn't exist a couple of years back, and now it exists, and it really lowers the barrier for our customers to go in there and buy products online. It becomes much more like shopping in the normal shop that everyone is used to. So I think that's key development in terms of what is improved. I think in terms of the challenges going forward, there's still logistical challenges. There's still in a lot of countries we need to see a concentration of payment methods, so we can see people find a good payment method online that works for everyone. I think the core for me that I'd really would be excited to see is if we can solve the Southeast Asian cross-listing issue. So basically the ability to have a product in Vietnam that you want to sell in Indonesia, or have a product in the Philippines that you'd like to offer across Southeast Asia, and being certain that import rules and regulations across the countries doesn't stop that product somewhere, so the customers end up waiting 2 to 3 weeks to get it. I think there's lots of exciting things happening in Southeast Asian cooperations between countries right now, which should really allow us to take advantage of having scale across Southeast Asia and bringing great small enterprises, designers from one country into other countries, and really that would help us, but at the same time I think it would help local businesses who are really good and inspiring to reach the whole market that we're in, and that will require some regulatory changes, and if it does happen, I think it would be a huge advantage for us going forward, and also for the local businesses in our countries.
Hi. Qten Singapore, we started this business in 2008 in Singapore. That time, if I say the infrastructure, I can say it was just like desert, so no payment. We couldn't get a payment other than PayPal. And then the 99% of our delivery was, the parcels were delivered by the SingPost. And then merchant, no merchant, just like, I mean, no offense, but small, the HBD, auntie, that kind of a blog shop, that kind of business. And no marketing media. So that was the situation at that time. If I describe it now, I can say it's still desert after 5 years. But now what I see is that the payment is there. So it's easy for us to get the payment now. But it may be same for any other players. If I look at the total delivery, the courier companies that delivers per our merchant, still I see that the 50% of our delivery is completed by the SingPost, but I see the rest of the 50% is from some other courier companies. This is a big improvement. And then but marketing media side, this is still challenge. If I share one number, we pay 5 times higher than what we pay in Japan and Korea. And then the conversion rate is like 10% of what we see. So this is a huge challenge. But I see now, we see very significant increase from the mobile app side. So that's good news to us. So, I mean, this is the overall situations. And still, I don't see that like very meaningful changes in the logistics infrastructures. So this is going to be a still challenge like next 2 years. I mean, this is maybe, yeah. Thank you.
Payments are improving, but logistics still a big challenge. Yeah. Okay. What about for you guys?
Okay, for Taobao, basically, I think the problems we face and the challenges we face are pretty much the same across all the e-commerce players. Logistics and payments are definitely one key areas we have to look at. And if you look at the region, for example, Southeast Asia, all the countries, we have 10 economies, 10 markets over here. Every country is at a different stage of development. So you have very mature markets, very sophisticated markets like Singapore, whereby payment and logistics is relatively easier, ease of doing business is a lot easier. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have countries like Myanmar, who is just coming out, opening up, and the infrastructure is not there. Logistics and payments is very primitive at this point. Like for example, in Myanmar, it's like only as recent as last year, they only had bank cards introduced into the economy. So the challenges that we face from logistics standpoint here because right now we are basically serving the Singapore and Malaysia markets. So we have a parcel forwarding service whereby we work with 3 vendors back in China right now to do a consolidation and then ship the parcels over to Singapore and Malaysia. We are also looking at expanding that service across the region to other Southeast Asian countries. But one of the main challenges we face from that particular perspective is that customs is a big problem. Bringing goods into the country can be a very big issue in terms of, let's say, for example, the de minimis number varies very wide from $400 Singapore dollars in Singapore to like $50 in, for example, 50 US in Thailand, for example. So that's a big problem, and the interpretation of custom regulations is also very different across all the markets. I think the other panelists here probably will face the same issues that we face. Then another issue for logistics will be returns. Returns is especially painful, especially for a marketplace like Taobao, whereby most of our sellers are based out of China. So doing returns back into China is one big challenge that we need to overcome, and we're still working on that. Regarding payments, payments is relatively easy here in Singapore. Debit and credit card penetration is very high. Basically, e-banking is also very prevalent here, especially over people who shop online. Then, for example, we have the other Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, whereby it's still very cash-based. Magnus pointed out cash on delivery is a very big thing. But there's always the trust issue. And most of you may know that we have this payment sister company called Alipay, which basically offers a escrow service. So that helps to bridge the gap. But the source of funds is always a challenge for us. So in Singapore, we launched things like, besides our global acceptance for Visa, MasterCard, and JCB, we also introduced this Alipay purchase card sometime last year. Then we also work with some banks in Malaysia to open up their e-banking channels. So we increased the number of source of funds moving into the different markets. We're still looking at the other ASEAN countries, and hopefully we'll have some news to tell everybody soon enough. Yeah, thanks.
I have like a really easy seat because everyone said everything I needed to say. So everything that these guys said, plus I think there's been a consistent rapid consolidation and an even more drastic expansion of vertical specific e-commerce and very specific SKUs on how to actually address consumption as a whole. So in terms of how has it changed from 2 or 3 years ago to now, I think if you look at more developing markets, I think for me, the biggest change that I've seen is actually culture. If you saw 2 or 3 years ago, people buying by credit card, it would have been super alien to even do that, much less actually pay online. Now people are at least open to people using little Veriphones and doing the actual card transactions face to face. I think if we go a little bit ahead, 1 or 2 years more, we're going to see definitively card consumption online, not face to face, increase drastically. But also in terms of how people address liquidity. So I think in markets like Indonesia, markets like Malaysia, I think the usage of carrier billing will become very, very big as regulation actually becomes a little less stringent so that you can actually buy things under $40, $30 with your actual SIM card. That liquidity will really help the market. But again, it shows how different the markets are from right now what the developed markets face and what the developing markets will face continuously. Sorry, yeah.
Cool. So a lot of us here mentioned the whole logistics problem. And I guess we can talk about that on 2 levels. There's the whole last mile problem, which is getting cash on delivery right, doing returns right. And you guys also talked about the whole regional problem, cross-listing and customs and all that. And this isn't a question for any single one, but from a regional standpoint, there's also a lot of talk on ASEAN 2015. Starting 2015, the economies will start integrating towards a freer market. Obviously, not in the same extent as the EU, but moving in that direction. How is that going to help a regional kind of strategy for e-commerce?
It's okay.
Okay, the McKinsey consultant, we'll start with that assessment.
No, I think we're all very excited about that. It's huge potential, right? You see, there are some countries in Southeast Asia who's really got it right. You know, there's where you have best practices that you can draw to other countries, and I think that people see the effects of that. And when you have a cooperation like that, it's a great opportunity, I think, for the Southeast countries to take the best practices and bring it to all the other countries. For me personally and for our company, one of the things we launched right now, for example, is our marketplace offering, which a lot of companies have. But really what we're trying to create is a place for young designers and hipster designers to come online to a wider audience, right? So to come in and being able to sell to the whole country. And fashion is a bit like this, that if a trend takes off, then it takes off. And it typically can then go to the whole country, and this designer used to sell to 20 people in his local community, suddenly sells to the whole country. Now, what we'd like to do, and what these guys are very excited about, is being able to do that across Southeast Asia. And right now that is very difficult, right? So we're able to cross-list a little bit in between Singapore and Malaysia, a little bit in between Singapore and Thailand. But if you try to make it much more complex due to the differences in rules that you discussed earlier, that issues with customs, that regulations is so different from country to country, and when you have to put the returns on top of that, being able to have, you know, a pan Southeast Asian offering is very tough. And also you can't take full advantages of regionalization, because you need this local presence that have the local knowledge and all that. So basically the whole capitalization of the companies becomes much higher. And we believe that this ASEAN cooperation and what is coming into place now in the next few years will make that much easier. So I personally am very, very excited about that, and I hope that a year to 2 years from now I can sit there and say that, you know, we helped bring this small designer in the corner of Vietnam to the whole of Southeast Asia, and if it's a hit in the whole of Southeast Asia, then you can create a new, big brands, new Charles and Keith, which is a great example from Singapore, for example. And I think the only way to do that is by creating a bit of equal regulation across the countries and open up the borders, which I think will happen if this cooperation is successful.
To us, actually, the cross-border transaction is really out of our interest, to be very frank, because I don't know whether we can survive like the next 2 years. So the Q10, our GOC's group, and then our local operation is purely focused on the local transactions. Because let's say, for example, like our transaction is depending on the cross-border transactions. Let's say now, Singapore case, we have daily 30,000 parcels transacted through our platform in local. And then 30% is from Korea and China and Japan, just like that. But if this share is like huge, then in other way it's out of our control. We cannot do like, local marketings for the each countries, right? It's going to increase our cost. So that's why at this point, like all this regulatory or the cross-border, like the environment change is not that meaningful to us. But yes, definitely it's going to be a positive sign in 2 years later, who knows, right?
So that's a very interesting difference with Zalora doing really regional play versus you guys, which are focusing on local transactions. How is Taobao thinking about that spectrum?
If you're looking at the ASEAN community, I think for the short term, there's no huge impact in the way we do business. But I do see opportunities, like what Magnus mentioned earlier, is that if there's a movement of people, movement of talent across the region, it could help really bring most of the lesser developed countries up to speed in terms of internet penetration. And I think that will benefit e-commerce as a whole, because the infrastructure is there, people are more savvy with e-commerce and online shopping and things like that. And I think that will benefit the whole industry. But in terms of logistics, customs being one of the issues that we spoke about earlier, is that if, let's say, with the ASEAN community, if it allows for easier cross-border shipments, let's say, for example, using Singapore as a possible hub, whereby your goods come here and then from Singapore you ship it out, and if it's easier to get custom clearance, that would benefit the business, I think, in general. But like I said, in the short term, the impact to us is not huge, at this point.
For me, because my main job is investment, I take a step back and try to look at it in terms of what does it mean for the overall cash flow. And I think, at least on an e-commerce level, I don't think that it'll make much of a difference, but I think aside from that, I think the branding effect will be much more bigger, as in, I think there will be a higher influx of FDI, foreign direct investment, coming in, just because there's a perception that the market is a little bit freer and a little less stringent in terms of how you can operate in terms of the boundaries. I think that'll be the most direct and short-term effect of how this kind of unification happens. But again, you know how the EU turned out, so let's just not hope for so much unification.
So to a certain extent, regardless of what we're doing here, whether you're regional focus or you're very local focus, there's still a lot of challenges in operating as a region. Let's focus now on what you guys are doing inside the organization, and I'm sure this could be helpful for potential founders out there who wanna get into the space. What are the internal organizational challenges in operating, across a region like Southeast Asia, from talent to coordinating efforts across the region to dealing with very different local regulations? I remember in my former life at P&G, where we tried to run the same advertising across the whole region. It was so hard to do that because I think in Indonesia or Malaysia, there's a lot of restrictions on how much skin that you can show in the advertising, which is very different from what you can do in Manila or Bangkok. So, internally, how are you guys grappling with that?
Always happens. I think that for Silora, it's extremely important to have this regional and local dimension, right? So I think it's very hard to succeed in Southeast Asia if you don't set up your organization to both have a local and a regional dimension. So we have in all of our countries, we have set up a local warehouse, local logistics. We even have a local delivery fleet in the key cities in Southeast Asia. We have a local marketing organization exactly for the reasons that you said. And we have huge debates, if we should shoot pictures with or without the hijab for Muslim wear. We have huge debates on how far we can go when we shoot lingerie. And the only people who can really give us the right answer there and ensure that we don't get the government knocking on our doors by having a local organization. So we have a local marketing organization. And we do try to localize everything where we see that we have an advantage of having it in place locally. So a lot of local logistics, a lot of local marketing, a lot of local customer service, all these things that really will give you an edge if you have it locally. Now, we also try to set up the organization to basically ensure that everything you can regionalize, you have cost advantages of putting it in one place. So like one example is buying GDN, Google advertisement, right? Buying Google advertisement in Indonesia is very similar to buying it in Malaysia versus buying it in the Philippines. So you can create a center of excellence within these functions where you have cost efficiencies of putting it in one place. So we do that with all of these things, right? So paid marketing, we mostly handle out of one place. CRM, not the content, but CRM dynamics and analytics we put in one place because you can create a center of excellence and the dynamics is the same, but then you can update the pictures and a bit of the content and the language of all of that. You need local resources to do it. So we really try to organize ourselves in a way where everything where we can take advantage of regionalizing it, where you don't get an edge of having it locally, we do it regionally. And then everything else we do locally, and we invest heavily in having the local presence. And I think that this is also a huge difference from how you could operate an e-commerce company in Europe, for example, versus in Southeast Asia. And I think we at least have a huge advantage of having this duality. And I think most of the companies here have this duality. And I think that's also why we are growing fast and we're succeeding. And it's a core principle of what we're doing. And we're trying to expand on that, always trying to realize where we can see an effect of saving costs if we do it, and then keeping it locally if we have an edge, and we grow both our local and regional organizations. So it's not that we're bringing local resources regionally right now, we're just expanding on what we can do regionally at the same time as we see new edges we can get locally.
Sorry, what was the question again? Is it internal challenge or the challenge that we see in the market?
Internal.
Internal challenge, organizational challenge,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Like if I talk about the e-commerce in Singapore, for example, over there, right? Let's say something that happened like every day actually. So many talent they join because they think e-commerce is hot, and then 1 year, 2 year, they give up and leave. And then I ask, hey, why you leave, right? And then, hey, it's too much, too demanding, right? And why demanding? I cannot find like merchant. And I talk to a merchant, hey, how come you don't join? Hey, I don't see the sales. Like it's just like chain effect. So what? Just like I said, like it's just like still the desert. So it's really not easy to build up the business. Though I mean there is a progress, but it's really really difficult. So because of this whole like environment, this demanding environment, many colleagues who join with the big dream, like e-commerce. Hey, I want to make something in e-commerce or like Singapore or South Asia, East Asia, but they cannot really sustain their, how can I say, the dreams or their passions here. So that's a challenge. I mean, even as a management perspective, like, I want to give them something, but still, it's challenging. Yeah. So we have good talent joining, and many of them also leave. So to me, the personal or management level challenge is that how can I keep, this group of the good talent like in the company? That's always the biggest challenge that I have. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Do we start with the demand side or do we start with the supply side? Because if merchants aren't there, then it's going to be hard to generate sales. But if the sales aren't there, the merchants aren't going to be there in the first place. It's a catch-22. For you guys, Saemin and Kelvin, what can we learn from China and Japan? I mean, obviously Alibaba and Taobao and Rakuten have been very successful in creating that infrastructure locally, that these are now very recognized brands for the average Chinese and Japanese consumer. What are the lessons that we can learn here in Southeast Asia?
Okay, let me try to put this in a very bite-sized story. Basically, if you're looking at Alibaba in China, I think the mission statement for the company is to basically to make it easy to do business everywhere. And I think because of that, I think the barriers to entry for sellers who want to come onto the platform are relatively low. Basically, it's basically a no-cost kind of platform for them to come on board. It's very easy for them to start business. You can be a small, medium enterprise. You can even be a cottage industry, having a home office and trying to sell some of your handicrafts from there. So I think from that perspective, that's how the business started to grow really, really quick. And I think one of the knock-on effects for the Alibaba group is that as we grew, we kind of created an ecosystem whereby a lot of supporting auxiliary services started to grow together with us. If you look at China, domestic logistics is from the surface of it, it looks very challenging because the country is so big, right? But if you look at how logistics deliveries, last mile deliveries are done, and in China, you'll be really amazed how efficient they can be and how low cost it can be done. And there are a lot of players. Of course, there are some big players in the market, but there are also a lot of medium and small size ones that continue to grow as the e-commerce ecosystem grows as well. So I think that's how the China Alibaba story started, and we're looking to see how can we bring this business model out of mainland China. We started with Hong Kong, Taiwan. Now we're looking at Southeast Asia. We're trying to basically try to see can we bring up the whole ecosystem within Southeast Asia and the rest of the world. Yeah.
Do we have time? There's a really nice iPad saying "last question, please." I mean, these guys address the question so well.
So to wrap it up, I guess to really help out the audience here, let's talk about what advice you'd give to founders who want to get into the e-commerce space. Saemin, you mentioned about going broad versus being very focused on a vertical. How would you advise a typical entrepreneur here who want to get into that space?
Look, I mean, e-commerce in the end is essentially about money. And in terms of how you get to GMS is very different in the path that you can take. If you look at, in many ways, the most successful online commerce companies have been actually two verticals, which is online listings, and number two is online games, digital consumables, right? So if you want to think about how you want to address your market and how you want to actually grow your pie, you have to think is this actually doable in the environment that you have? If you don't, what verticals do you need to jump to actually expand your pie and increase that consumption base? And that's actually, every time I do an investment, that's what I look for. So all the investments that I've made are very actually conservative. The one that if you look at Carousel, who doesn't want to buy something at the most affordable rate with a person-to-person, right? C2C is as old as time. If you look at quota payments, you want liquidity, you want to free it up. A lot of times it's in your communication platform. So if you want to be an entrepreneur and find your context of success, your context of success should match closely or should over-exceed that of your addressable marketplace.
I mean, if I add just a little bit what he just mentioned just now is that because there are like a lot of like to-be entrepreneurs here, and then what I see is that e-commerce is hot. So the VCs, everybody talk about e-commerce, but like if my friend asked me, "Hey Joe, I want to do e-commerce," I would say no. Okay. The reason being, one is that first, like I said, marketing cost is crazy, it's high. You don't see the conversion. And the second thing is that like the infrastructure is not there. It's, I mean, like delivery, all this, right? So it's going to be a very, very challenging period. So, and investors will not wait, right, for this. So that's why I would say no if they want to move into the e-commerce. But if you think in a different way, let's say, for example, if you look at the Uber, everything is already there. They just slide in this platform there for the business. If you look at Q10, nothing is there. Like the merchant is not there. Developing this, the core component doesn't make sense. So we need to think twice, if you want to go for e-commerce.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think number one, think like in any entrepreneurial business, think product, right? So I see a lot of e-commerce companies have launched and they spend tremendous amount of money on marketing, but they don't really have a product to sell. It's a bit the same actually with Silora in this early phase, where I think we spent too much money on marketing instead of building up our product portfolio. Now we have a very nice product portfolio. I mean, we can spend a lot on marketing. So get a product right. I think the second thing is spend a lot of time on talent, right? Spend extra amount of time hiring. I mean, I tell everyone working for me that you should spend every day after 9 p.m. you should be doing recruiting, and it really pays off. Right? I think most of you have the experience of getting the right guy can mean more than hiring 10 people who can deliver to the right level. So getting hungry people, hungry talented people, extremely important. Third advice I would give is don't try to reinvent the wheel, right? The e-commerce industry right now is closing in on 20 years in business, or 15, 20 years in business. And there's a lot of knowledge out there. You don't need to find it out by doing the mistakes yourself. So read up, talk to us. I think the community is actually very open, right? We were just standing here earlier chatting and chatting about how to reduce customer acquisition cost, talking about our basket sizes, what you can do to increase basket sizes. And we help each other out, because I don't think Southeast Asia now, e-commerce is in such an early phase that we don't necessarily view each other as competitors. We more view each other as creating an e-commerce business. There's so many customers out there that if they do some marketing, it actually helps us because they create e-commerce customers. So just go and talk to everyone in the community. I think everyone is very helpful, and don't try to reinvent the wheel.
I'm not an entrepreneur myself, but for young people out there who probably want to look at starting your own business, e-commerce or otherwise, the way I see it is that if you look at trends that are ongoing, you probably missed the boat. So my best advice that I can probably give a young person today is that take a step back and look at what are pain points in your life and the people around you. And from those pain points, I think you can probably find ways to overcome it. And if you can overcome it, basically you'll have a winner. And that's probably a very good foundation for you to consider what's your next business idea. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So unfortunately, we don't have time for questions from the audience, but as mentioned, happy to chat with anyone here on the sides. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for the insightful chat, and wishing you all the best. And thank you for being here.